Hello and welcome to another Hand Drink Solo info video where today we are talking about the Fledge Co Old Bush Vine Tinta Barocca 2020, which is made by the husband and wife winemaking team of Leon Coetzee and Margot Nell. Now Fledge Co base their operations out in Calitzdorp in the Klein Karoo, and they make most of their wines in the BoPlaas cellar. But while they may seem cloistered away far off in Calitzdorp, their influence actually spreads far and wide across the Cape Winelands as they source fruit from across the region in order to produce some really fascinating wines. This is really why we love Fledge Co so much, because whether they're making an Elgin Viognier or perhaps South Africa's only Touriga Franca, they are always about seeking out the unusual or expressing rare cultivars or taking a fairly familiar cultivar from an unusual vineyard so that it expresses an element that perhaps you would never have considered in that particular grape. Now today's Tinta Barocca is taken from old bush vines planted in 1971 on a farm called Jakkelsfontein in the Paardeberg in the Swartland. At Hand Drink Solo, we've been talking recently about the need to highlight farmers and farm managers and viticulturalists as much as we highlight the so-called rock star winemakers. So at this point, it is essential to say that the farm of Jakkelsfontein was managed by a magical character called Swart. Jakkelsfontein as a farm was later bought and split by two of South Africa's most famous winemakers, Swarty and Adi Badenhorst. And part of the appeal of this farm was the fact that the vineyards had been tended for and the land had been cared for by a man like Swart. Andre has also worked in the past with people like Andrea and Chris Mulliner. And really in the Swartland, if you've worked with Swarty, Adi Badenhorst, and Andrea and Chris Mulliner, really that's about as high up the angelic wine ladder as you can climb. Really, the thing that made him so great was that he didn't farm vines in order to yield grapes, but rather his vision extended far beyond the harvest into the cellar. I'd go so far as to say as the decisions he made in the vineyards were really considering the wine as it would end up in the bottle in 5 years or 10 years' time. So as weird as the phrase seems, I would call him a wine farmer, not a grape farmer. And this is something that is much needed in the South African wine industry. Sadly, Andre passed away in 2023, but since then winemaker Leon Coetzee has taken this wine, the Fledge Co Old Bush Vine Tinta Barocca, and in a sense dedicated to the memory of Swart. So it's only fitting that this wine then went on to earn a PLATTER 5-star award. But while PLATTER 5-star awards are not to be trifled with, they are also no guarantee that you will personally enjoy the wine in the glass. So let's get into it and see what there is for us. Well, when we give it a sniff, we get up front a rather intense wave of sort of blue and black fruit. There's very ripe blackberries and black with sugar plums and blueberries. But there are also some oak elements as well. There's a hint of vanilla and mostly a sort of smoky oak element, which really works quite delightfully and also makes sense because the wine was in fact matured for 18 months in a combination of 500-litre older barrels and also a smaller 225-litre barrique. When we take a sip, well, those black fruit notes are offset by a slightly more vibrant sort of red berry sherbet, which really brings lovely balance. And while the fruit is not super dense, it's velvety and soft enough to make you begin daydreaming of kittens. Now, for those of you who have drunk a lot of Tinta Barocca, and especially the slightly more progressive earlier harvest examples, you'd be more familiar with wines that are medium-bodied and red-fruited rather than being dense and inky and black-fruited. But in the warm, dry climate of the Swartland, it is not at all uncommon to get a far more intense, riper, richer expression of the cultivar. One of the drawbacks of Tinta Barocca as a cultivar around the world, but notably in Douro in Portugal, is that it can often overcrop. And when it delivers too many grapes, the intensity of the final wine really drops quite quickly. And this is partially why, for the most part in the Douro, Tinta Barocca is seen as a blending grape. But in the Swartland, where yields are often much lower by necessity or simply because the far older vines have dropped their yield naturally, well, you can taste there is certainly no lack of intensity on the palate. As I've said in other videos, this is what makes South African Tinta Barocca, and especially Swartland Tinta Barocca, quite special indeed. I've left a few links to some other South African Tinta Baroccas that are worth hunting down. Okay, so that's all we have time for today, but if you enjoyed the video, then consider supporting us on Patreon and subscribe to the Hand Drink Solo YouTube channel, where we publish at least 6 videos each month talking about wine history, wine science, unusual cultivars, and some of the rising winemaking stars that are coming out of the dynamic South African winelands.